honor the significance of Holocaust Remembrance Day. It is an event which I hope will be deep and meaningful for you. I feel very privileged that we have as a guest speaker Mr. Eric Vernon. You have read a little of Eric's life and bio in the bulletin. For the last 24 years, Eric has been the Director of Governmental Relations and International Affairs with the Canadian Jewish Congress, and through those works has done much for for people of the Jewish faith, but also for humankind and for Canadian society. I have come to know Eric through the Canadian Christian-Jewish consultation. Sometimes at that table, discussions are tense and difficult, but Eric always brings to the table a desire that discussion be well-balanced and fair and just, and take a broad view of the needs of humankind. So it is a great privilege to know him, and it is my great privilege to welcome and introduce Eric to you and into the pulpit of St. Andrews this morning. Welcome, Eric. God bless you as you speak.
Esteemed clergy, special guests, ladies and gentlemen. I want to begin by thanking Reverend Lewis for that warm introduction and to wish him a happy 5th anniversary here at St. Andrews. And I want to thank all of you for the honor of speaking to you today on behalf of Canadian Jewish Congress in commemoration of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. In her remarkable novel, The History of Love, author Nicole Krauss tells of a boy and a girl in a small village in Poland, growing up in the pre-war period and coming of age after the German invasion. The boy, now a man and one protagonist of the novel, recalls that for her 16th birthday, he gave her an English dictionary, and together they learned the words. Later, when things happened that they could never have imagined, she wrote him a letter that said, "When will you learn that there isn't a word for everything?" My friends, this young girl intuitively understood that our vocabulary, as rich and expressive as it may be, can scarcely keep up with what the mind can scarcely grasp. And so it is true that there have been things in Jewish history too horrible to be believed, but not too horrible to have happened. Nothing epitomizes this more than the Shoah, as the Holocaust is called in Hebrew. The Holocaust represents the starkest illustration of what happens when ethnic and religious hatreds are allowed to permeate society while individuals and peoples remain bystanders. If the road to Auschwitz was laid with hate and evil, it was surely paved with complicity and indifference. My friends, by your presence here today at this extraordinary service of solidarity, you are sending a clear message to the Jewish people that you will not remain silent, that you will remember, and that we are not alone. Words cannot express my gratitude for this comfort. Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, is a relatively new addition to the Jewish annual cycle of holidays and observances. It was created in recent times, along with Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, which is the very counterpoint to the Holocaust. This encapsulates the miraculous path the Jewish people followed within a single decade, from near destruction to astonishing rebirth. Indeed, the government of Israel established Yom HaShoah to fall on the 27th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, to correspond with the beginning of the 1943 Jewish uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto, which lasted for almost a month against overwhelming Nazi forces. As such, Yom HaShoah falls between two of the oldest and most significant Jewish holidays on the calendar. These are the recently completed Passover, where God freed the children of Israel from slavery in Egypt, and Shavuot, where 7 weeks after the exodus from Egypt, they received at Mount Sinai the Torah with the 10 Commandments and the laws and ethical guidelines for moral behavior that gave their newfound liberty true meaning and higher purpose. We reflect today on the depths of inhumanity and the defilement of that moral code that was the Shoah. Whenever I ponder the dark days of the Holocaust, I I'm reminded of what Anne Frank wrote in her famous diary. "That's the difficulty in these times," she said. "Ideals, dreams, and cherished hopes rise within us only to meet the horrible truth and be shattered. It's really a wonder I haven't dropped all my ideals because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out." But of course, she went on to add, "Yet I keep them because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." It is this profound sense of optimism and spirit of hope that ultimately inspires me and helps me grapple with the unthinkable. For it is safe to say that the Holocaust represents a watershed in human history, a period of horror that redefined the limits of the depravity of human nature and expanded humanity's consciousness of evil. The Holocaust has become the seminal point of departure for understanding the general potential of humankind for such inhumanity. The Holocaust was unprecedented in the sheer scope and nature of its murderous agenda. Motivated by a perverted racial ideology, the full weight of the massive Nazi bureaucracy was brought to bear on what it methodically called the final solution to the Jewish question. The ultimate goal of this insanity was to make the world Judenrein, that is, free of Jews. The Holocaust was a slaughter organized on bureaucratic principles and executed on an industrial scale. In the end, the Nazis murdered the vast majority of Jews that were under their control during the Second World War, including the killing of 1.5 million children as part of the horrific scheme to eradicate the Jewish gene pool. We must also recall that the Nazi war machine was responsible for millions of other civilian casualties, including the mass murder of political opponents, Sinti and Romani people, homosexuals, and persons with mental disabilities, and we mourn these senseless deaths as well. But it was only the Jews who were fated for total destruction. In the words of Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were victims. My friends, a quick scan of the globe sadly suggests that if the ultimate lesson of the Shoah was never again, the world is a very poor student. Indeed, never again seems to have become again and again. The book on 20th century genocide that should have closed with the Holocaust has subsequent chapters titled Cambodia, Rwanda, and Kosovo. And the hopeful promise of lessons learned entering the new millennium has given way to a new ugly chapter still being written called Darfur, one that may at last be moving to a conclusion. In each case, the international community failed to recognize the early warning signs and then compounded its negligence with inaction and a failure of will. This may be happening yet again today in Iran, where President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad overtly denies the Holocaust of the Jews, while at the same time seeks nuclear weapons to finish the job. So as we ponder these contemporary horrors as a key element of the reflection on Yom HaShoah, we must recommit ourselves to making sure that never again is not an empty slogan, but an organizing metaphor for the protection and enhancement of freedom, human rights, and equality for all peoples. My friends, the writer James N. Barrie once wrote that God gave us memory so that we might have roses in December. I would argue that in the case of the Shoah, we must commit ourselves and future generations to precisely the opposite. We must pledge that when times are good, that is to say in the summer when we have roses, we will never allow ourselves to forget the genocidal winter that descended upon the world 65 years ago. In the end, it comes down to the watchword of Yom HaShoah, Zachor, in Hebrew, the imperative to remember. And so we will remember, and we will help, and we will work together arm in arm toward a future of peace and justice. In his remarkable speech of March 23, 2000 at Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Memorial Museum, Pope John Paul II stated, "The world must heed the warning that comes to us from the victims of the Holocaust. and from the testimony of the survivors. Unquote. Indeed, many of those who survived the horrors of the Shoah chose Canada as their adopted home after the war, and have made enormous contributions to all aspects of Canadian life. With the memories of their experiences seared in their minds, they bear witness to the hate and brutality that was unleashed in the name of the final solution. With their quiet dignity, they beseech us not only to remember, but to look forward and apply the lessons learned. While the best resources for this are the survivors themselves, for nothing can approximate the value of first-hand eyewitness testimony, there will be a day when those who personally suffer through the Shoah will not be here to tell their stories. As such, we must pursue efforts, as you have done so powerfully here today, to keep alive the flame of memory for all generations to come, to ponder both the unprecedented nature and dimensions of the Holocaust and the universality of its lessons and messages. Canadian Jewish Congress has been actively involved in 2 national initiatives that will help this important cause. A private member's bill, Bill C-442, mandates the government to provide land through the National Capital Commission to establish a Holocaust monument in Ottawa. Both houses of Parliament unanimously passed the bill last month, and it was among the pieces of legislation that received royal assent immediately before Parliament was dissolved. Canada, strange to say, is virtually the only country among the Western Allies not to have a state-sponsored monument to the Holocaust. And this anomaly will now be rectified. Appearing before the Senate, Canadian Jewish Congress said that the monument would accomplish a number of important objectives. It will, we argued, provide a fitting tribute to the victims and survivors of the Holocaust. It will honor the tremendous sacrifice of Canada's military in World War II and its contribution to the defeat of Nazism, and preserve the sacred memory of the righteous among the nations, those heroic individuals who risked their lives to save Jews during the war. A Holocaust monument in the National Capital Region will serve to remind all Canadians and tourists alike of the need to combat racism, anti-Semitism, and discrimination in all of its manifestations. Such education is critical to promoting core Canadian values of respect for diversity, social justice, and equality, and to inculcating in our young people the importance of human rights and human dignity. In this vein, I am reminded of the story of a young girl who sits down on a park bench next to an elderly man. "I gotta tell you, mister," she says to him, "that's an awfully boring tattoo on your arm. It's just a bunch of numbers." Well, the elderly gentleman replies, "I was about your age when I got it, and I kept it as a reminder." "Oh," the girl says, "of happy times?" "No," the man says, "of a time when the world went mad." "Imagine yourself," he says to her, "in a land where your countrymen followed the voice of political extremism who didn't like your religion. Imagine everything taken from you. Your entire family sent to a concentration camp as slave laborers, and then systematically murdered. In this place, they even take your name and replace it with a number tattooed on your arm. It was called the Holocaust, when millions of people perished just because of their faith." The girl, now in tears, says, "So you kept it to remind yourself of the dangers of political extremism?" "No, my dear," replies the survivor. "I kept it to remind you." Now, in another important development, the Canadian Museum for Human Rights is scheduled to open in Winnipeg next year. In CJC's written and oral submissions to the museum's Content Advisory Committee, we urge the museum to provide appropriate permanent space for exhibiting the Shoah. We argue that having redefined the potential of humankind for inhumanity, the Holocaust provides a lens through which subsequent human rights developments must be viewed. There is a direct, virtually genetic link between the Holocaust and the contemporary culture and infrastructure of human rights. From the ashes of the Holocaust emerged the foundation for contemporary human rights law and structures, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention on Genocide, and the United Nations itself. The line from the post-Holocaust international human rights agreements and treaties also flows directly to the notion of enforceable human rights here in Canada. The manifestation of those rights is rooted in our federal and provincial human rights codes, civil and criminal anti-hate legislation, a body of relevant jurisprudence, and ultimately in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Beyond that, we suggested that the Holocaust has had a profound impact on all aspects of human understanding and knowledge, including theology, philosophy, sociology, the arts and literature, and psychology. The museum will help the public better grasp how the Holocaust has so profoundly affected not just the Jewish community, but the world at large. To its credit, the museum has announced that its plans include a permanent hall dedicated to the Shoah. And we look forward to the opening of this remarkable facility next year. So, my friends, as we ponder the significance of this day, we must bear in mind the two central elements of our reflection. The first is for the lost generations, the lost communities, the lost humanity. 6 million Jewish victims are beyond our comprehension, but each had a name, each had a life, each had a soul. I mentioned at the outset that the paucity of our language cannot capture the true nature of this outrage. So I will let the poet William Wordsworth help us come to terms with this heartbreaking loss to the world. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight to me is seemed apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now as it hath been of yore. Turn wheresoever I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen, I now can see no more. The rainbow comes and goes, and lovely is the rose. The moon doth with delight look round her when the heavens are bare. Waters on a starry night are beautiful and fair. The sunshine is a glorious birth, but yet I know, where'er I go, that there hath passed away the glory from the earth. What though the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight? Though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind, in the primal sympathy of what having been must ever be, in the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, in the faith that looks through death, in years that bring the philosophic mind. My friends, the other aspect of our reflection, as I have tried to emphasize, is that while the scope, magnitude, and mechanized bureaucratic implementation of the Shoah made it unprecedented, its lessons are more universal. We must vow to use Yom HaShoah as a day to reflect on and educate about the enduring lessons of the Holocaust, and to reaffirm our commitment to uphold human rights. But this reflection will only be meaningful if it is a prelude to action against injustice, crimes against humanity, intolerance, and discrimination wherever they exist. We must use the flames of the candles we will light this day in memory of the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust to illuminate the way for humankind to a brighter future of peace, equality, and justice. This will be our testament. This will be our legacy. Thank you.